vibration, but one by one, these conversations start to change you because they start to open your eyes to seeing something so much more about the journey of life.
Hello, beautiful. Welcome to this episode of Her Daily Rhythm, the podcast dedicated to empowering you to live in harmony with your mind, body, and spirit. I'm your host, Natalie Smyth. If you haven't met me, I am a qualified naturopath and nutritionist, guiding you on this journey with FemVed, a holistic wellness platform dedicated to supporting women from menstruation until menopause. So, in this episode, you are privileged because I am interviewing such an incredible expert in the field of chanting, sound, and mantra. Manorama is an international teacher of Sanskrit, meditation, and yoga philosophy. She is the founder of the Sanskrit study method that guides students to access and build the practice of Sanskrit into their lives. And she also founded the Luminous Soul Method, a path that teaches students how to live the traditional path and practice of yoga in modern day life, which is crucial. Manorama has numerous tools and audios, most notably that are albums where she has been featured with The Invocation with Krishna Das, huge, and Maha Maho with Wade Morissette. And in this episode, Manorama and I discuss Sanskrit as the language of vibration, which I had no idea about, and enables a deeper understanding of life itself, using language and sound as a vibration that can cultivate self-awareness and harmony. She discusses how regular practice can ground you to improve your focus and allow you to perceive life with greater clarity and inspiration for daily practice. Invaluable tools in life that we need for an uncertain world, but if you have that groundedness, that focus, that dedication, that devotion, that courage, every moment is just an opportunity to transform. So tune in. Like, subscribe, do all of those things because it helps me to connect with incredible practitioners like Manorama. And please leave your comments. Tell us what you love and let us know if you do try the chanting exercise and how you find it and if you can include it in your day. If you can include it in your week, maybe 10 minutes a day would be really great. And if you could let us know the before and afters, I would love that so much. And please, as always, let me know what we could do better, what you love. Enjoy the episode. Welcome, Manorama.
Thank you for having me.
I'm so excited to have you, particularly with your deep knowledge, a Western woman that has really gone deep into this. I read one of your quotes on your website and I loved it. So I would love to start by going into this. So you mentioned that Sanskrit is the language of vibration. When we chant Sanskrit mantras, we begin to understand this essential vibration, since vibration is under everything. Sanskrit offers a doorway to the deeper meaning of everything. I would love for you to go into that. Sorry for going straight in there, but that really covered everything I think about you. So it would be so nice to unpack that.
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me on your beautiful platform and your podcast. It's a pleasure to speak about that. Basically, how is Sanskrit? How can sound be a doorway to understand? Most people understand learning Sanskrit as, oh, you're interested in that subject. They think of Sanskrit as, oh, you're scholarly. Some people think, oh, you're heartfelt because you like to chant. But they relegate Sanskrit to sort of the way they understand most languages, because they think of it as, oh, this is language. This is how I understand what language is. But Sanskrit is unique in this way because what it's trying to get across is what is language overall. And by looking at what is language overall, we're looking at what's up underneath everything. What is the structure of what we? Well, language here is the structure and the way you communicate that structure. Yeah, it's very deep. So we start in Sanskrit learning the 5 mouth positions that are on the palate. We don't learn this in English. In English, we mimic. We mimic our mother, our father, or some person who's a brother, sister, or someone who's an elder in our circumstance, the child. And the book, it goes the book, eventually get to the book. But what does that even mean? But in Sanskrit, we start by looking at this position, this position, this position. And where does that go? Where does that focus go? It goes from our intention merged with breath, and it desired to communicate that, and it lifts through the palate and strikes and then releases different simple sounds where we start. And then those sounds travel place, those vibrational, like when you throw a pebble into a pond, it doesn't just stop. I mean, sometimes you can go for long, but if you kind of send it off like that, it has a ripple. And in the same way, when we direct sound to different locations on the palate, we're directing energy to different areas of the face, the brain, the head, which is the throat, which is the center of communication. Talk about the head in a second, and the heart, and then further. So what we're doing is we're intending through vibration to these points, and that starts to, when I think about it in the context of your work here and the rhythms that you speak so much about in a variety of ways, which is beautiful, lovely. Sanskrit is a language of rhythm. Everything is on the rhythm. The biggest mistakes people make in Sanskrit are on the rhythms, and the way that they come into alignment is with the rhythms. So rhythm is a huge thing in Sanskrit. So what happens is when you direct the energy to these different places, you start to perceive rhythms, and you start to perceive energy, and you start to understand yourself in a different way. Now, to thread the needle to the larger point, once that starts to work on us through mantras, through Sanskrit development, and so on, through meditation, what happens is you start to not see, for example, I have a glass here with some, this is a glass. Most people are like, oh, glass, they like the shape, they don't like the shape. Most of us see through the lens of I like, I don't like. Is it heavy? Is it light? They go through qualities. But when you study Sanskrit, and when you absorb yourself in yogic wisdom on Sanskrit, not just an intellectual understanding, what happens is you start to recognize this is vibration. And it's not just an intellectual understanding, it's a felt understanding. And everything, this is vibration, this is vibration. And from that, they become awarenesses. And they are not intellectual. They may have an intellectual component at some point, but they're not primarily like, fascinating, really interesting. They're felt, and they then become wisdoms. Wisdom rises from these felt experience. That's how Sanskrit becomes a doorway.
Wow. Okay. I guess that there's so many things there, but I guess I want to just unpack it a little bit for perhaps our audience that might not know the difference between Sanskrit and then mantras.
I need to explain a relationship between Sanskrit and mantra. Sanskrit is a language. It is a language that underneath the Proto-Indo-European. I'm not going to get too scholarly in all of this. I don't think it'll serve. So you have Latin, Greek, and Sanskrit. They are mother languages, sister languages to each other, mother languages. They descend off of Proto-Indo-European. The Sanskrit language, is where the concept of mantra emanates. And if you don't mind, remind me to come back to what is the concept of mantra. But Sanskrit, the word itself is quite beautiful, centralizes around the root kara, and san is the intensifying prefix. It means whole, complete. Nothing is missing. So Sanskrit is a complete language, a perfect language, but not perfect like some idealized perfect, but perfect in the sense that it's whole, complete. Nothing is missing. Extensive, we could also say, as it is. Sanskrit is, people can approach Sanskrit from different angles. But the concept of mantra comes from Sanskrit. Sanskrit is like mathematics. It's realized, not a man-made thing. It's realized. Then you have, like mathematicians, you have rishis who, through the power of their energization, realize these mantras. So Sanskrit, you can become a strong scholar in Sanskrit and not study so well. I guess not true. You'd have to study to be in Sanskrit, but you don't have to go deeply into it from a spiritual perspective. But I will say I have done that work. Having trained with my guru, and under the tradition that I've studied in, you learn about mantra as a living practice. Some people learn about it as a fascinating practice in university, and not all university people are like that, some. But I've learned about Sanskrit as a living tradition. And everybody knows who studies Sanskrit that it emanates from the seers of light. So the concept of mantra comes from Sanskrit. The first mantras are in Sanskrit. Then other languages like Hindi and Pali and Tibetan and Japanese, and it goes on and on. Now there's even English, and so on, anything. But primarily the concept of mantra is protection and expansion of your being through the heart, through the mind. Man means heart and mind. Naha. My guru said is to protect, but it means it's a tool really for expanding the mind, for expanding the heart, for expanding. It's not so great to say expanding the mind because people who study will say, wait, I thought we're supposed to get beyond the mind. Why are we expanding the mind? But it doesn't mean that you are making the mind more and move more and loop. It means that you are transcending mind. You are expanding and growing the heart and the awareness in this way. So I hope that makes sense.
So just to bring it back to a modern context, somebody that's working 9 to 5 or people that have families who have never really ingratiated themselves in Sanskrit or mantra or even a spiritual practice, are you saying that developing mantras or having this as a practice helps you move away from objectifying substances or things, moving it into deeper communion or relationship with object, things, life?
I think it's a wonderful question. For the modern practitioner or for the modern person who wants contact with these, or wants to even just dabble and see what happens if I do this. What is the value of it to me? I have a 9 to 5, I may have kids, I this, I that. Sanskrit and mantras specifically help us create a channel with ourselves. They help us create a channel of self-awareness. Mistakes we make are when we are not self-aware. All the difficulties we suffer come from some lack of awareness, right? So through Sanskrit and through mantra, chanting, which is from Sanskrit and then later from other languages as well, and I can speak about that later. But through that, we come into harmony with ourselves. And so often people say, well, I don't know myself. Good to recognize that. And then let's set about understanding ourselves more deeply. So mantras become like little shamans that create a between us and the divine, if that makes sense. They themselves are like mini gurus. They have their own wisdom to teach us if we engage. And you know what I want to say also? I think people sometimes feel they're so precious that they don't want to do it wrong. And it's funny because I'm such a strong practitioner. This is my 40th year in the subject. But I will say this, in the beginning, while you do want to try to pronounce them accurately, you don't want to do this to yourself. You want to first have the experience. In the beginning, when I was learning, my guru, he used to say, "What, keep going." And people would, I grew up in a place where everybody spoke excellent Sanskrit. It was very different from nowadays. It was like everywhere I went. And when I would chant, sometimes it wasn't correct. And people would say, you have to tell her this and you have to tell her that. And he used to say, let her be, she's percolating. And what I learned from that later, of course I learned to align. Of course I learned, but it was like in a loving process. Everything is a step by step. So for those who may feel like, oh, I don't want to do it wrong, just jump in, have fun, explore some of it. And then little by little, you can start to create those alignments and build them in. It's like...
I think because it's an ancient practice too, it will start to show you that you have to make the first commitment and the devotional practice since it is an ancient lineage.
Totally.
And then you never get anything by not starting, do you?
Right. So well said. Beautiful.
Yeah. So, well, I would love to hear how, you mentioned that you've been in your 40th year and, for the Western person, it was kind of seen as hippie-ish or woo-woo to get involved in it perhaps 40 years ago. So I'd love to hear how that manifested for you, how your journey started.
So yeah, it was rather underground. And I just recently
Mm,
broke because
mm,
yoga was a bit underground when I first began. So I was very I was struggling as a teenager quite a bit. I was the last child in my mom and dad's family, typical third child, rebellious, struggling. My mother was very curious about a lot of things. She studied Course in Miracles. She used to have people over. She used to do
mhm,
all kinds of eclectic things. She was an artist, but she was also a therapist. She also worked for the government. She helped children and so on. So I bring her up because it was her wish. She said I learned in a little bit like a different kind of way, and she had hoped that the man she met, this man across the river, she thought he was so wise. She called him Guruji. And so she'd hoped he'd have an influence on me. But I didn't really know she was going. I didn't know. She was, my mom did her thing.
mhm,
One day when I was 13, she said, want to go check out this talk? And of course, as a 13-year-old, I was like squinting down, going, does she want me to do both? If she wants me to do this, I definitely won't do it. And my mom had no poker face, but this one time she had a really good poker face. She was like, so I said, okay, I'll go with you. I said, who's doing it? She goes, oh, this doctor is speaking and blah, blah, blah. So I said, yeah, okay, whatever. So I went, and that day changed my life forever. I sat down in this class where this doctor was going to speak. And when he came in, he was all dressed in orange and he started speaking and he talked about life and the meaning of life and what are we all doing here and yoga and Sanskrit and spirituality. And it was just, wow. And afterwards, I said to my mother, who is that man? Like, he's a doctor? I never met a doctor like that. So, and she kind of still played it cool. "Oh, yeah, how did you find that? Blah, blah, blah. But I was just instantly riveted with all that he said. And so for me, it's kind of funny. I think a lot of people, they look for gurus, but for me, the guru found me like
mhm,
near my grandparents' house in upstate New York. He was from India. He was a
mhm,
brain and he was a PhD in Sanskrit and he was a yogi. He gave up his medical practice and taught yoga in the West. He was one of the 10 yogis who came to the West. And I met him at a perfect match. People are often like, how does a 13-year-old girl do this? But it was a good match because I was in the beginning of my life. He was in the end of his, very similar to grandparents. So for
mhm.
me, very much like a grandfather figure. And he took me under his wing and he trained me in all of this yoga, philosophy, meditation, taught me how to cool. So that's how it first came into my life. And of course, in the early years, I didn't know. Like I just was in the training. And that's what was so great. He was so smart. Real, it doesn't look like,
Mm.
no, we're going to begin the great training. That's motivation. But one by one, these conversations start to change you because they start to open your eyes to seeing something so much more about the journey of life.
And I think that's it. Well, that's certainly what I'm noticing is that devotion or the spiritual practice of the opening is a daily practice because we can listen, learn intellectually, and we will know concepts and things like that but to truly embody it, to know it into your body and then teach it and share it. That's the daily micro moments, isn't it? And
Right.
I
That is
feel
the
like
thing.
that's what that mantra is. And I think it's also beautiful that when you were 13, sure, you were lucky where the moment arrived for you, but you also met the moment. You were almost searching in your soul, and I think, but we don't give children credit because they're always searching, they're always aware, they're always hungry, they're creative energy, aren't they? You just had that bit of, okay, I want to follow this thread. I want to follow this, and I have the courage and I have the support and I'm going to follow it. Where, I think I even actually had that opportunity at 13, but I was maybe didn't have the mentors around, or, I see this with a lot of other young children, is that the environment isn't properly nourished to support it, to meet the moment, or
Yeah,
having
well,
that
that's why I
behind
mentioned
you.
mom, because she was nourishing that. She would bring me there,
No.
me up. I wasn't just dropped off. Also, I forgot to speak about the woo-woo part, but I want to mention it to you, and I didn't forget, but I just was winding, so I didn't get it through. But yoga was seen as woo-woo back then, or very nuts and granola, I guess is what you mean. But at the whatever that means, right?
I love
Not,
that saying. Just so great.
but he was this scholar, surgeon. Him was to study science, like the science of vibration. So what he taught me was, I loved this about him. Don't just have the knowledge, integrate the knowledge, become an integrated person. And what I loved was he was both scholarly and juicy. That's the way I would describe it. He wasn't like scholarly dry or just juicy and no scholarship. He was able to back up his statements, but at the same time, it was filled with so much heart. So to train with him was to really took time, I had to develop in it. And as you say, it was a daily process. Find my floor in it and show up for the practice. You're right. Yes, I did show up for that. And much of that was I had been searching, and people thought that was very strange. But my grandfather had passed when I was young, and I was very close with him. So that kind of pattern matches. And then when I met this wise teacher, he was right willing to talk with me about what is death, what is life. And he didn't shy away. He wasn't freaked out. He was like, aren't those great questions? So that was also very helpful. But I would say mostly he was willing to have the conversation. And I think a lot of times in life, we're not willing to have conversations, or we see them as bad, or
Mm,
around things like death, like, oh, don't talk about that. Let's just forget about that. And I say in the West, the plan in the West about death is pretty much pretend it's never going to happen. And then when it does, pretend it never did, which I don't think is a very good plan. So he was willing to meet questions head on and to resolve them, and then have nice food and some laughter and some song and some colorful whatever life, and then rest and get up and do it again. And
mm.
it was really helpful. And so it just, I could see why it was woo woo, but was really quite scholarly and scientific at the same time. So it was this unique merging of many elements: art, science, scholarship.
Mm. I think when we're afraid of things, or if we don't understand them because we don't have capacity, we just put them to the side and call them something derogatory so we don't have to investigate them, do we?
Yeah. So
Um, yeah. And with Sanskrit Ayurveda, I know that there's so much research delving into it. It's harder to have randomized controlled trials, obviously, because like, what are we measuring? But I know there's a lot of meta-analysis, and we are doing research as to the power of mantra, how it can affect your nervous system, your blood sugar, your stress levels. But before I go into that, because I know you've got a lot of juicy details, I just want to go back to this word that you mentioned on vibration and frequency, because I think with sound, that's definitely what we're invoking, and how vibration and frequency affects your nervous system. So you mentioned that he was speaking about the science of vibration. So what are you noticing in these scientific inquiries, but then also noticing anecdotally in your own practice?
well, the science of vibration is rather complex, right?
Okay.
It's called the science of vibration. It would take up the remainder of this
Okay.
podcast and then some. But I will say this, that there is a science to vibration. And
Mm,
mentioned in the Vedas. And we'll talk about that more specifically. But I will say that there is science around mantra and Sanskrit and all of this. Similar to meditation, mantra is its own form of concentrated attention on a point. So when we concentrate on a point, we could be on this point and we could be on that point. And we all know with the phones, every minute we're being interrupted to the point where either ourselves or those close to us, sometimes you'll sit at a lunch with somebody and they can't even talk to you. They're on their phones so much. Or maybe you're doing that. Maybe we're doing that. So no judgment, but just like the life is pulling us in multiple directions. So the practices of yoga tell us, stay on the point. We use like drishti in the asana practice. In Sanskrit, we use grammar or we use the mantra. The mantra becomes this repetitive or repeated element that we say. And by saying it, we get a chance to explore it more in depth. The exploration, for example, we take a simple mantra. We all know Om Namah Shivaya, but let's take another one. Om Namo Narayanaya. Okay? Narayana is one form of the divine. Om Namo Narayanaya. Om Namo Narayanaya. Om Namo Narayanaya. You can take a feminine form. Om Shri Lakshmiyai Namah. Om Shri Lakshmiyai Namah. Om Shri Lakshmiyai Namah. Just chanting these are simple sounds that then form beautiful words. These sounds have the capacity to draw our attention. And if I repeat them over and over, I did 3, but if I repeat them over and over again, I could be excited. I could be not excited. I could be bored. Om Namo Narayanaya, Om Namo Narayanaya. But I go through this whole gamut of experience when I repeat until I come to kind of the totality of the relationship. Just like we have with anybody we love, we have, and then we have, and then we have, and then we have, and then we have. We have so many different facets to a complete relationship. So mantra is the repetition gives us that opportunity, and it helps us develop focus. Because, if you don't focus, you won't stay on that chant. So you develop focus. So you're doing what's counterintuitive to modern life. Modern life says, be constantly busy, be running, keep idealization in front of you, but nobody can ever reach up to that. And, so they do that with practices. Everybody thinks it's like a carrot with a stick. There's an idealized practice, and only those people who do everything perfectly are fit for practice. No, practice is for everyone. And we take it into our daily lives. So with mantra, we want to just engage the practice. We'll start to notice we develop a stronger command of our focus than we normally. A good practice would be to say, well, do you notice how your focus is now, even if it's all over the place? And then notice through meditation and through mantra, can you notice through the chanting how you're able to steady that focus and steady that attention? Then from that, what do you notice in your life? You take that practice, now you look in the life. How is that affecting my life? Am I able to see more deeply into my children, my job, my family, my partner? What can I, in nature itself? Then also maybe through chanting mantra, I'm able to sit in meditation more comfortably. Because what happens is through chanting, I feel vibration. When I feel vibration in the body, then I also feel it in my mind. When I feel it in my mind, I can more easily dissolve from this material realm and be present with a more spiritual realm. I'm not going, I want you vibration, which many people often tease I will vibration. I'm actually just being present to what is the width, what is the heart.
Mm.
And by doing that, and by being willing to sit with my own nature, I, meaning all of us, we are able to see the essential nature, everything around us. That's the byproduct. Just like if you're a dancer and you dance regularly and you engage some specific form, when you're not engaging dance, let's say there's a place, Steps in New York City, it's a famous dance. So let's say after you do your modern dance, then or any dance, it's not a particular dance, and then you have a bag over your shoulder, you're walking down the street, but you don't walk like somebody who doesn't dance. You still have contact with that alignment. And it's not that you walk so better, you're just walking more in yourself because you spend time in yourself physically, in the awareness of your limbs and physiology. So in the same way with mantra, spend time with yourself as energy. We're going to be able to see that everywhere. Makes sense?
It sounds like the ultimate wonder drug that we're all seeking outside of ourselves, but just by doing that, that's all you need. I mean, it's that simple, it's free, and we have access to that.
I love it. I'm afraid it's so true.
Yeah, I mean, when you just did that, I could feel it coming through, and it's like time expanded but expanded. And I think that's what we really all after. We're compressed for time, and it's like it's almost a status thing to not have enough time and so busy, 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 busy. But that in itself is a mantra, isn't it? I'm busy, 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 busy. So of course you will be stressed. So it feels like the mantra is the expansiveness, and it's shifting your neurochemistry and neurobiology. So I've got a lot of questions that I would love to ask.
Wait, can I jump in on that? So when you think of things like mantra and tantra and yantra, which we all see have tra at the end, that's part of the gift of those. They are expanding in some way. That's the idea with Ayurveda. You lengthen life through these principles. Lengthen doesn't mean that if you leave the body early, oh, you failed. Nothing like that. Everybody has the karmic code that they step into. But this idea of lengthening is about expanding. This is the concept in embodied life, to expand ourselves. And I think when we see with yogic wisdom, we're able to actually become conscious of those rhythms that we want to step into, not just following on the path of what some other whatever group of people have set for, or we start to say, I'm gonna make an intention about how I want to live. So I do this exercise, Natalie, where I'm on the subway and I see everybody's rushing, and I've been rushing. I'm in Manhattan and and I'm gonna get off at 96th Street. And suddenly I become aware, gee, I've been rushing. I have a spine injury in my neck, so I rushed to my spine doctor. Then I did the practice there. Then I rushed to the subway. Then I rushed home. And so I said to myself, I'm gonna slow down. Now the key is when you slow down, you don't say all those rushers. Look at these rushing people. You were just one of them. So you don't move into judgment. You just go to the door. Everybody's still barreling, but you just feel the feet underneath you and be present in yourself. Walk off the train, walk up the stairs. And so we don't have to wait for the world to give us permission. And we don't have to judge anybody for it either. We can just simply be in ourselves and hold to a new rhythm that's going to be more supportive to ourselves. That's a choice we make. And we don't sometimes know we have those choices. And for me, Sanskrit has told me this. For other they practice. For mantra, meditation.
So in those moments where your mind is running ahead in the future or present, the practice for our listeners is to chant or come into presence and chant a mantra.
Yeah.
And what would be your favorite mantra for women? So somebody maybe, we know that women have our rhythms of our bodies. So for women that maybe are dealing with more stress or anxiety or any hormone balances, is there a mantra that can anchor then? I know that's quite generalist.
I mean, there are very long hymns honoring
Mm.
healthy cycles. So I won't do that. We'll do that another time. I'll come back. Wonderful place to start, place to begin. We have to start somewhere. Everybody's jumping in on the double Dutch. You know what I mean? Everybody thinks there's supposed to be some perfect beginning. But the truth is anybody who studies yoga is, the what do you call this? The jump rope. You know how you've
Uh,
seen people, they're doing like 2 jump ropes
yeah.
and then jump in, right? Exactly.
Yeah.
So anybody in yoga that start or that wants to begin any of the yogic practices, they start on the double Dutch. It may say beginning, but the truth is you got to jump in. Get and just try. Say this mantra. It's very simple. Om Namo. I don't know how can you do it. I had one in my mind, but I'm thinking of 2.
Yeah. Sorry, it might be my energy. 3 questions in one.
What? You know what? I'm going to change it up and use the one that I chanted before, because I think that'll be very helpful for your listeners. And that is Om Shrim Lakshmyai. The key is the myai. Myai is a little tricky for us when we're not used to it. But if we can master the myai, which is an myai, myai, then we're good to go.
Myai.
So Om Shrim Lakshmyai Nama.
Om Shrim Lakshmiye Namah.
And Nama is Nam is the root to respect, to extend respect, to extend reverence, honor. So we get namaste from this. Namaha is the breath at the end is ha. So we just say namaha.
Namaha. Namaha.
Right.
And it's interesting going back to your original conversation is that I have never enunciate my mouth so much in normal English speaking language. So yeah, to go back to your original point, I can feel that.
Initially, I think it can be things that we take for granted, like speaking, or in the case of asana, like moving or standing still in a pose. We take them for granted. It's just what is. But when we start to study practices like yoga offers us, asana for the body and for the mind and heart, mantra and meditation for all the things, what happens is we start to become almost hyper aware initially, and then it softens and settles into our natural rhythm. So, Om Shrim Lakshmyai Nama. So let me chant this with you.
And so with our hands, we would put our hands in
Yeah,
our
it's
heart.
very helpful when you are addressing cosmic force to bring your hands into a kind of a prayer position. It's very nice. Have to, but it's very nice because you're symbolizing this is the purpose of this, by the way. Originally, this is called Anjali. The idea was that you would put something, a flower or water or something that you're giving. And the idea is here, I give this to you and I thank you. Please send me, it's this kind of Proto-Indo-European cultural thing where it's like give and receive. So this is a reflection of just, I have something and I'm giving this to you. And so what we're giving now is our respect. So we say, Om Shrim Lakshmyai Namah. Om Shrim Lakshmyai Namah. Om Shri Om Shri Lakshmi Om Shri Shmi. Now, what I want everybody to do is focus on the third eye, right there at the space between the eyebrows, just a little bit above, as you say the last 3 and say them. Om Shri Lakshmi. Om Shri Lakshmi. Om Shri Lakshmi. Om Shri. Mm.
I feel that it changes your voice. The tone of it changes the tone of your voice and expands open your stomach, your gut. There's air going into it. So instead of going from that contraction, I've lengthened just
Right.
just
Complete.
those
And
minutes.
even this mantra alone is asking for greater prosperity and alignment to settle into our lives. Greater alignment can be finding the right teacher. It can be meeting the right person in your life. It can be generating more wealth for what you want to expand. It can be having children. It's a very useful mantra in a variety of ways. But whatever is that next step for us in alignment, this mantra is so very useful. So we can use
Mm,
this us come into a kind of a more, we call it a Shri rhythm. It's a rhythm of alignment, a rhythm that will help us grow our lives in a much expanded form, in a joyful form.
So you would recommend our listeners practice that mantra every day for at least a month?
So, what I would say actually is I like to give people smaller practices that they build. Can you do 3 times a week, 3 mornings a week? You set a little practice of 8 minutes. And for the first few minutes, you begin with 9 repetitions of this month. And the rest, you sit still and feel. And you put a little timer. Everybody can put it. No surfing the phone, no emails, just sitting still. Even if you're uncomfortable, don't worry about being uncomfortable. It's part of the practice. Just try to turn towards that and be present with yourself. And some days you may be bored, some days you may be happy, some days you may be whatever's going on in life. But if you make that commitment 3 times a week, 8 minutes, the beginning is 9 of these repetitions, and then sit still and do this for 1 month. And then after a month, assess, do you notice any difference in the way you are moving in your life? Do you notice any difference in the way that you are behaving in your family or with friends? What do you notice? But I think what we do sometimes is we try to put the cart before the horse. We try to notice. We want to game it out before we engage it. Engage the practice. I love what you said earlier. Engage the practice and then see what you
Everything is for an outcome, but you can't blame us because our culture has built that way with pharmacy and everything and all of our ambitions and so forth. And it's brilliant to be ambitions, but the practice and the devotion to that will give us really anything and everything that we've ever wanted with
completely love what
patience.
it's a beautiful acknowledgement that this is the movement and there's nobody to blame in that except that how I think we come back to the question. I think that Sanskrit gave me the ability, Sanskrit mantras definitely gave me the ability to be intentional about how I wanted to step into life and how, and I'm happy to share them, how they can step into their own, whatever that looks like, limit or own life and build greater abundance and build greater peace. So many of us are struggling and we rush here, we rush there, barely get to sleep. There's like some massive sleep epidemic, Talk to anybody. They're always telling you they're tired. I don't know if I had a penny, as my grandma would say, for every person that told me they were tired. And so if we can engage various practice, one of them being, of course, mantra chanting, meditation, so many other things that you talk about on your beautiful show to help us align with and create a rhythm that we want to be intentional, that we choose. You'd be amazed how many people will follow you.
And I think that's really interesting because you can tell people to try to do something and you keep telling them and then you start nagging. But then once you start practicing and slowly when these people start to notice how your life is changing, that's
Mhm.
when they'll start asking you, what are you doing or what can I do?
Totally, completely. I love that. I literally was going to say something. I was going to say that one time a woman in Virginia asked me after she was in a class with me, she said, how do I get my daughter into this? And I said, listen, if you are happier, if you're more grounded, more balanced in yourself, you will not have to get anybody into anything. People who love you will notice and they will ask you. and according to their thirst and capacity, they'll engage.
Mm. So I know you've touched the lives of many people, and you have a lot of clients. So I would love to go into to what you shared too. But what have you noticed in your journey of how people's lives shifts from the subtle to the most extreme? Extreme. Sorry, that word is a bit intense, but the bigger
Well,
shift.
you need a bigger shift. So I started noticing about 20 years ago,
Mm.
maybe a little before that, I started noticing that people were really making huge growths when they worked with me because I was seeing it on a variety, like I was seeing it over a large group of people, more and more people as the years went on. And I was like noticing, oh, and so what are these transformations, as you asked, small and large? I think one of the small transformations is they get connected with their breath, which sounds like a funny thing because we breathe every day. So we're like, what's the big deal with that? I'm connected, I'm breathing. But connection with one's breath is really a beginning of a connection with your soul and your self on a different level than we're used to. And so that's very helpful. But I also think they gain knowledge.
Mm.
They gain a lot of knowledge in actual application of living a yogic life. So that includes traditional teaching, but how do they thread through a modern? I always said I wasn't going to be a replica of my own guru because he was a traditional Indian man, UP. He was very scholarly. I have scholarly, but I'm not only that. I'm a woman who's a man in body. I'm in modern New York world. Don't live in an ashram. I
Mhm.
visit, spend a lot of time there. So I knew I would work with people who are living in the world and who want to understand their own nature and want to understand something more out of life. And so I think that for the students that come, they really start to feel, I've noticed, quite grounded in themselves after a little bit of time. They start to develop grounding and they develop an ability. They don't have a bibbity bobbity boo. They don't have a magic wand that says, I will never have a problem. That's not realistic and that's not real. What they get so connected with themselves that whatever comes up in their life, they have a way to meet it. Wisdom, with grounding, and with capacity. And they start to grow in yogic knowledge, which is also quite fascinating on a variety of levels. And it just gets more and more interesting. I always tell people Sanskrit has not been quit me. And I'm very grateful for that. It's such a interesting subject. Mysticism that, on the highest level, it's just so beautiful. So they get that. They get a real sense of grounding and confidence in themselves that comes
Mm.
not by buoying themselves up and just, I'm going to be confident, but they get it by being deeply connected to self. Then they can explore these subtler cosmic layers. And it's not from that, when you're connected with your ground, to explore the subtle layers is not rule. My guru had a student and she said to me one day, our guru makes strong people. And I thought that was really beautiful. And so I think they gain a certain kind of strength. They don't become like that, but it becomes strong, like in themselves. They
I think it's like we misassociate or misinterpret strength with this terror. But strength is, I think, is it in, there's a movie reference, be like the twig, be like water. It's building that intuition capacity, and life is going to keep throwing things at you, but it's your response to it and knowing that, okay, I have a deep trust and rootedness in life. How about we do this? Or how we do it from this grounded inner knowing, this wisdom piece that you talk about. And I think that's so important.
really, and that changes everything. It's one thing to be in reaction to everything in life. It's an harmony life. To be in harmony means to move in, to listen deeply, to recognize, and not to always be in a place of the other. Instead, we move into, we're all in this together. We're growing at different places. I'm not moving into higher or lower. I'm just moving into a deeper harmony of conversation and communication with myself, with around. And that's a very different place to exist.
I really love that. And yeah, I mean, it's quite amazing that you live in New York as well. Arguably one of the busiest, bustliest cities on the planet. So yeah, and you've created your own bubble. You've created your own peace, tranquility space. So for the woman as well, if she was living in New York or living in London or living anywhere, who is maybe in a little bit of pain, fatigue, they're looking at their phone constantly. What is that first action for them to take to commit to? That whereas I mean, we
What's
have
this?
spoken about this. Sorry, we have spoken about this where, and nobody in their world or knows what yoga is or Sanskrit or anything like this. So it's that trust that I'm going to do this because really I've got no other option as well.
Yeah. Well, I think their next step would be to. So first, I want to address that just 1 second. So in the early years, I always wanted everybody to go with me. I wanted my father to know everything that my guru was teaching me, and and everybody. And I came to a place where it's okay. We don't have to make everybody believe like us and do like us in order for them to be connected with us. Maybe they're not interested, but they are interested in food. So I always tell somebody, I didn't talk about the cosmos with my father, even though he asked a couple of times, he would ask a few little things, and I would, but mostly it was my character had been transformed. I would ask him about his
Mm,
shoulder that was bothering him. I would hold his hand. We would talk about local politics. That's what where he was
mm,
from, old times. Because of my groundedness in myself, I was able to meet him and we were able to find points of connection from there. So that's number one. Number two, what can somebody do? Well, they can acknowledge what they
mm,
want, something they want to try. And from that
mm,
acknowledge and make a practice. And I think everybody, I mean, I was at my grandparents' house. I met this teacher and I was like, what do you do? He said, meditate on the inner sounds. And I went, we got to try a little bit. Then the
mm,
cows that, oh, a capable teacher. And then we take that information and try to integrate it. The first step I would say is re-listen to this podcast because we talked about a lot
mm,
and probably many of your podcasts, because I've listened to a few and they're quite beautiful, but listen and see, follow your heart, where your heart kind of longs to go in whatever way
mm,
that is. And then I would say, again, as I mentioned, say I'm going to do a month of this practice. I'm grooving. So I don't know why, but I like. So then, if that's the case, you want to give it a shot, great. Jump in on the double dutch. Jump in and just sit there and know that you won't know everything. So much in learning is the capacity to hear, okay, is not knowing it, which is not a little thing. And say, okay,
mm,
I'm learn something. Let me, and then you practice. And then see what questions arise, what wisdom arises, as I said, after a month, and live your life and bring that in. So that would be the next first step. And of course, so many other things people can come and study. There's for school. There's my Substack, which I talk. I started. This is an unexpected area where I teach, but Substack is truly an unexpected area. Somebody mentioned, try this, So I was like, well, I started, but it's just become this lovely area where I share what it is to see through yogic, and I share various
mm,
things, whether it be formal yogic knowledge, like on what are the two aspects of Om and what's valuable about that, or how to build faith in our life. Why is that bad? Looking at difficulties. What is healthy anger? What is unhealthy anger? So all kinds of different things, and from Sanskrit mantras to living life with a yogic eye. Those are my talents.
mm.
And so those are what I'm thinking that are options for people in this regard.
I love that. I think there's a greater awareness. People are speaking about it now. It's coming up in daily conversations too. So it's just following the seed or following the current. And I just noticed in myself that I'll do a little bit of mantra chanting, but for somebody's mind that is always future, past, present, all the time, it just helps anchor me. So I've loved it as a practice and I would love to practice what you showed us. So could you speak about your course, how people can find you, what
Sure.
your offerings are, because they look so beautiful.
Thank So I will share one thing on what you said, and then I'll share ways to jump in. One thing
Mm.
is, I think one of the biggest things that I myself experienced years ago, and also I observe in people, and that is we think our one little mantra isn't going to do anything. What's my one little day this week? And what's 5 minutes going to do? But actually, that's the thing you have to fight against. Practices. Everybody is capable of opening up to and learning. The thing that we have to fight against is this idea of what's this or what's just a little bit of this? How's that going to get me to? Instead, just be loving towards that voice if that comes up at any time. I do that. I turn to myself and go, yes, but I need to get this done. I want to get this. Whatever it is that I'm training myself. So I'm learning spreadsheet these days. I have to remind my inner switch self, you must. You've chosen to do this, right? And then I love the benefits of being able to diagram things and learn about things. That voice that tries to sabotage us is very helpful to recognize and expect it and have a little plan for when it shows up. So that's it. Ways to study are a couple of things. So we have what's upcoming is we have Rishi Club. Rishi Club is a gathering of students on Zoom on the live classes on Tuesday nights, but at 6 to 8 p.m. New York time. But if you can't make the live call, then you can come to the recorded. You can watch the recordings, okay? And then you can submit questions that way. So Rishi Club is a place I used to read to my teacher. First thing he told me one day was, you want to come and read to me? It's called I Am That. And I started reading. And I always tell people in those days, I thought I was reading. And he was listening. And I thought, what a nice person I am to go and read to this older man. And I soon found out that I was knee deep in a deep training and that he was so kind to listen to me, read, and try to resolve whatever doubts and confusions I had that were being taught. So it was this lovely dialogue. So from that, I started, now it's called Rishi Club. I teach on the teachings of various rishis. We're still in Maharaj, or we're on that right now. It's called The Path to Happiness. And people give way reviews about it. I know I'm supposed to get reviews and send them out to everybody. Sometimes I just try to stay with my own rhythm and not go. But people love it. I've heard people say to me for the first time in their life, they are able to really have a steady meditation. It always eluded them. They engage various practices of yoga, but now they really see and they understand how to do it. And it flows more easily. People say they love being in the growth. The people are very caring and respectful and nice. They're from all different levels, from brand new beginners to people and years and more. We do readings. Then I give the discussion on it, and then we see what questions arise, and then we take that home and that's all with it. So that's starting October 8th. That's the live class, October 8th this year. And so you'd have to go and make a little application, but it's the smallest application I think I've ever made in my life. And it's a beautiful course. We've done various of them, and it just really it becomes this thing where you're like, I look forward to this every week. And that includes the people who are in Europe, because a lot of the students who are in Europe also say, oh my God, I love it, and they are doing it via recording. So that's the biggest thing. The other thing that people can do is come to a satsang. I teach twice a month. I teach a satsang, once 6:30 to 8 on one Friday and once 1 p.m. to 2:30. So that made it, the European petitioned me for a little access.
Yeah.
So, but now it's filled with people who are not from Europe and some from Europe. So it's very super. So that's the satsangs on Fridays. And you can look at the satsang schedule. The satsang just means a meditation and a teaching. Like there'll be some spiritual teaching, a mantra, meditation, and so on. So that's that. And then as I said a few minutes ago, the blog has become this zone where I'm doing quite a bit of teaching. And if they become members of the blog, then they can go into the chat and ask questions on the blog, and we do a little interactive sessions. And the blog's just doing very, very well in terms of, I feel that every week I have something I have to say to people, and then they are working with it. And that feels really wonderful because I'm watching people grow. And
It's your living meditation. And I think just to point out on the satsang and your Zoom calls, I've personally noticed is that the power of when we come together with the wisdom and these teachings is just translates through time, and it's like that energy. You can feel that heart space.
True. And showing up, you said it earlier. I don't know how you said it, but I have to rewatch it. It was beautiful. But there was this, it doesn't happen if we don't show up. But when we show up, so much happens, even in my what are those things called? Excel spreadsheet.
Yeah, yeah.
Sure, no, but I'm there in the end.
Yeah. Yeah, you're meeting the moment, and I've committed to this, and so I've told the universe or whoever I've committed. So
Yeah.
now we have to show up and meet it and then see everything unfold.
Like,
Amazing. Well, Manorama, we ask all of our guests a couple of rapid questions. So whatever
great.
comes first to your mind, I'm just going to shoot some questions at you.
Okay, let's do it.
So, I mean, obviously all of the things we've spoken about this, but firstly, tell me how you live in rhythm.
Oh, yes. So I live in rhythm. Let's see. How do I live in rhythm? Well, I get up every day. I hold to practice. I chant regularly. I love deeply and hold to boundaries. I value people in my life. I value all beings, animals and human beings. And I have made it a commitment a long time ago to integrate these teachings into my life and to bring them in. Sometimes I bring it in directly where I'm actually chanting something or I'm teaching something. And sometimes I bring it in indirectly where it's allowing me to be more grounded in myself so that I'm able to see my niece and have a lunch with her, hold my dad's hand, read a novel. I don't know. It depends, depends on what it is.
And so do you have cheat days? And what do you do on those cheat days?
Yeah, I have cheat days. I always say it's very important to create a steam hole. So you and I were so in alignment. This is great. But I always say it's important when you're working with practices, don't be too rigid. So even if I'm not rigid, because that's not my habit anymore, but it's like to build a deeper sense of ease and fluidity. And also, I like a cheat day or I call it a steam hole day, where it allows for the unexpected. You have the practice, then it's like, I need a little unexpected. I need to see if there's something. It gives the opportunity for the universe to send some unexpected humor, wisdom, light, and it allows the breathing. So my cheat days or whatever you call it is I like to go to jazz. I like to listen to jazz. It's unexpected to most people. They're like, wow, aren't you listening to mountains? Yes. Another month, listen to it. And I also enjoy jazz. I enjoy all kinds of music. And I like to go to the museum. I like to spend time with animals. I really enjoy my life. So I'm not like longing to get beyond my life, but I will say that cheat days, as you're calling it, they give me a chance to create more openness and fluidity in the experience and allow the unexpected, which is so important.
I love that, but I definitely wouldn't call those cheat days because that's so beautiful. You're living, you're feeding your soul, seeing jazz. I mean, go to the museum, that like
Yeah, right.
godly.
It's not that, right? But being, I don't want to be content unexpectedly or unaware because I'm so, and I can do that. I'm so fiery by nature, pitta and all that. But so I go, go, go. But it's like, no, I have to be intentional about step back and see something
Mm.
different and you can see a new perspective. And that helps me. So I call that my cheat day. But also watching a movie, stuff like that.
Oh, that's beautiful. I just thought you mentioned something, and I think it's really important. You mentioned you don't like to be rigid and rigidity. And you did actually mention at the beginning how your guru, the teaching is quite rigid. And I just want to bring that back to the importance of women, how we are secular, we're whole, we are not supposed to be rigid. Could you just touch on that a little bit, the importance of removing rigidity?
Yeah, I mean, we try to do it right, all of us. And we get it, even with Sanskrit, it's like, this isn't the right pronunciation. Of course, I want to help people come into alignment, but I don't really want to fill the rightness thing. You know, I mean, I think right for one person, for someone else, okay, let's work a little on this area. And someone else, let's work a little on that area. So there's a lot of multiple areas to develop in any practice. But I do I see that happening in over large body of people. I've seen it and I see it in myself. So I try to work with it in myself and then I work with others in that. And what I mean by that is I see a kind of tension that can rise, not a tension, but tension that can, because we're getting into it and we can want to gun it. That can sometimes show it, right? Long ago. That can create a tension, or it can be we try to game out the practice. Well, what's going to happen if I get the meditation? Am I going to this and am I going to that? Or am I going to be too right? Or this kind of stuff. It doesn't allow the openness and the ease that needs to be present in order for the wisdom to reveal itself and find a place to settle in us. So as often as possible, I try to move away from judgment. I'm human. And so I come through a human form, meaning, so I occasionally get annoyed sometimes. I get frustrated with certain things in life, but I try to move more into the question of understanding. Let me try to understand this more. Doesn't mean I can't express anger or frustration, but I think that if we move with tension too long, it makes us pop in some way. It creates the situation where we don't get access to what we want. So I try to keep my eye on that.
I think that feeds in nicely into the following question is, what do you do on those days that everyone around you seems stupid or they're annoying you? Or you've got a shorter fuse than normal. How do you come back into balance on not those days, those PMSy days?
Yeah. I get frustrated, like I said, I get annoyed and I get bothered. But the difference is I try not to live there very long. Doesn't mean I try to bypass my anger either. There's this, I remember one time a student said to me that one of the characters in this epic poem that Ramayana went into the anger. What's up with that? She said, why would somebody in yoga want to go into the anger realm? And I said, because we need anger sometimes. It tells us something is incorrect. Or let's say if I don't have any sense of fear and I put my hand over a flame and I'm just like, well, that doesn't hurt. And then I'm just going to burn my hand off. So we have these, we don't want to live in anger. We don't want to live in tension. So we get annoyed, but we try to find that balance in ourselves. Through practice, we cultivate a further, or we use the term expansion, but deeper space where we can say, okay, this was a little confusing. And maybe we go back and talk to, or maybe we don't. Maybe we say, it's not the time for talking. But when we have more room in ourselves through practice, we're able to meet those moments of annoyance or frustration with deeper inquiry. And that's where I tend to live now. Like I said, I'm not interested in judgment. I know what's an orange, what's an apple. I can see when someone's acting like inappropriate, but I recognize it and I reflect on it. And I think less reactive, and more like curious. But of course, I'm human. There are moments when I'm like, enough, So, but it's not so common. So that's that's a good sign. And I think that, I think most people tend to bounce back and forth between rightness and judgment to some extent. And I try not to live there. So I remind myself of that. But I'm human, like anybody. And so if I do have a moment where I'm like, I'm so frustrated, then I will remind myself, maybe I need a little more something. Becomes kind of also a barometer of maybe I need a little massage. So maybe I need a little more space in the schedule. Or maybe rest. It depends.
It's feedback. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
And so what is one statement you use to hype your girlfriends? We speak badly to ourselves. So
Right.
when they're going through something, what's your feedback to them or statement to them?
I feel like I'm a very empowering force. My girlfriend. I was very fortunate to have many, many wonderful and empowering women. Both grandmothers I had contact with were very dynamic, wonderful people. My mother, I would say that I would be very esteeming to them and remind them, and I would give my energy in that way. I would remind them that you are enough and that whatever it is you are pursuing at this moment, you can realize just to settle into yourself, but you are enough as you are. And whatever your growth is, you're developing that and it will become realized.
Mm,
I have
mm,
that faith. I know that.
mm. We all need that. Yeah. And then lastly, where do you get your motivation from?
Where do I get my motivation from?
Yeah, if you're having a bad day, if something's happened or, you're feeling a little bit low, where do you get your motivation from?
Hmm. Um, I've always had a very strong inner drive. Like my
Mm,
sister would say, wow, I've had a strong drive. Just get it from contact with myself.
mm,
Gently, don't ignore that relationship. So I don't ride it. You know how like in relationships, sometimes you can ride the fumes. I remember a friend told me that one time. She and her partner were separated for a period of time and they got to a point where they were riding fumes and it stayed with me. So I don't ride fumes with myself.
mm,
I make space for myself in my own way. And from that relationship, I'm able to be deeply present with others. So in the beginning, I'm sure it was from my relationship with my group. It was truly phenomenal. And I wasn't like just instantly and transformed. I had to work with it. And I told you I was struggling as a kid. And so I really was struggling and he stepped in. So it wasn't like everything was just roses. But initially, it was from my relationship with him that after a number of years in my own practice came an integration and he has become my own heart. And so my relationship with myself, which is multiple things. Maybe it's you're feeling pain in the body, right? Since going through menopause now, I've noticed that my joints on. Well, I've had to pay attention to my body in a new way. I'm sure I've had to pay attention to my body in a new way. But that's a motivation. The motivation is I want to have that contact with myself regularly. I know that everything in my life stems from me. And the second thing is I'm deeply motivated by contact with the divine. The divine is not something I treat outside of myself. I treat it as I'm constantly in dialogue with, some people call it God, some call it the divine. I don't mean that's divine, darling. I mean, I'm really in contact with that essence and that light. And that gives you an endless supply of energy. That would be like the highest.
that's beautiful. And I think it's just remembering that we are divinity, divine. It's nature. Look at nature. It restores. It goes through the cycles, life and death. Everything is just beautiful. I think humans created ugliness because all of nature, everything around us, the mantras that you share, it just opens you up so much.
Cool. Love it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
So thank you so much, Manorama. That was such a beautiful conversation. Thank you for your
oh, I
time,
know. We're
sharing
so
your essence.
elemental, right? I the get with your presence as well. I love all of the beautiful things that you shared and said. And this is obviously a very beautiful conduit and path by which women can come into deep harmony with whatever they choose. But from that choosing, from that connection, sides. Love it
Oh,
so much. I'm honored that you've
thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank